Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to calmly and methodically unpack a pretty fundamental shift in how artificial agents might actually remember. We'll be looking at a conceptual framework known as the energetic paradigm. The core idea here is that we really shouldn't be viewing an AI's memory as just passive storage, like a digital filing cabinet full of text. Instead, we need to completely reconceptualize memory as a system of persistent control. So let's jump right into the central question of the energetic paradigm. How can an artificial agent remain continuous across time without becoming rigid, incoherent, or detached from reality? Think about it. Right now, an AI model can do incredibly useful work today, but then it essentially wakes up tomorrow as if yesterday never even happened. Sure, it might have access to a conversation history, but merely storing that history? That is not the same thing as persistent agency. The real challenge we're facing is figuring out how to maintain an agent's continuity across different days or sessions, all without the system losing touch with reality or getting stuck in outdated, rigid behaviors. To help us understand this transition, our agenda today is straightforward. First, the central memory question. Second, redefining agentic memory. Third, the energetic paradigm approach. Fourth, the incomplete document example. Fifth, continuity and correctability. And finally, current research status. Section 1. The central memory question. Let's start by establishing the baseline problem with how conventional AI systems actually treat the past. Looking at the differences here, on the left, we have ordinary AI memory. This relies on passive conversation histories, stored documents, retrieved passages, accumulated summaries, things like that. But here's the issue. That stored information usually returns to the AI without carrying any real operational weight. It's essentially just context. Now, on the right, the energetic paradigm views memory entirely differently. In this framework, memory is a system with finite capacity, made up of persistent obligations, hard evidence, and strict action boundaries. For memory to be truly agentic, it actually has to govern what the agent is permitted, expected, and able to do next. Section 2. Redefining agentic memory. This stark contrast means we really have to redefine what it is we're asking of our memory systems when designing these agents. You can really see this shift in the foundational question we're asking the system. Conventional memory architectures basically just ask, what information from the past is relevant to the current prompt? It's essentially a similarity search. But the energetic paradigm asks a much more demanding structural question. It asks, what part of the past still carries legitimate control force? What resources should sustain it? And how must it alter the agent's next action? It forces the system to actually consider authority, risk, and future consequences, rather than just semantic relevance. Which leads us directly to this formal definition. Under the energetic paradigm, agentic memory is defined as a maintained control structure through which the past continues to organize the agent's future allocation of attention, authority, resources, obligations, action, verification, and correction. So in this framework, memory is absolutely not a pile of text. It's a strict, finite control structure that securely binds an agent to reality. Section 3, the energetic paradigm approach. So what are the specific, non-proprietary mechanics that make this control structure actually work? Well, the core mechanics dictate that memory is never just passive information. Every active memory consumes limited capacity and fundamentally changes the agent's future possibilities. For example, a remembered commitment keeps an obligation open. A remembered failure should actually increase the system's resistance to repeating that same procedure, whereas a verified success might reduce the cost of future action. Similarly, remembered permissions open boundaries, prohibitions close them, and remembered uncertainty actively preserves the need for later observation. And importantly, forgetting isn't an error. It's the highly controlled release of memory that just no longer produces sufficient value to maintain. This completely redefines how we think about learning. Ultimately, just writing down a lesson in a text file, that is not learning. If an agent writes a reflective note that says, I shouldn't do that again, but its future actions aren't actually constrained, it hasn't learned a thing. True learning occurs only when verified experience produces a disciplined and observable change in future behavior. Section 4. The incomplete document example. Let's ground all this abstract theory with a very practical, everyday example to illustrate how this closed loop actually functions. Imagine an agent is tasked with producing a report, and it outputs an incomplete document. Now, a weak memory system would merely store the user's complaint as text and move on. But under the energetic paradigm, that failure structurally reopens the obligation. The system recognizes an unresolved consequence. It then alters the actual generation procedure itself, maybe by introducing a mandatory visual inspection step, and it introduces a strict verification requirement. That open loop remains active, consuming resources in the agent's operating context, until a verifiable confirmation of repair is fully achieved. Section 5, Continuity and Correctability. This highly disciplined process really relies on maintaining several broad forms of structural continuity across time, while of course still allowing for necessary corrections. For an agent to possess stable agency, it has to seamlessly preserve several specific forms of continuity across days or sessions. It absolutely must maintain continuity of unfinished obligations, so promises aren't just forgotten the moment the context window resets. It requires continuity of evidence in its source, meaning it remembers exactly why it knows something and who originally authorized it. It also has to maintain continuity of its valid operating boundaries, the procedures that have earned trust over time, and a continuous thread of correction for when its earlier actions inevitably fail. However, an agent that never changes is rigidly unhelpful, so this continuity must remain highly correctable. The system isn't aiming for perfect or permanent memory, it's seeking stable but revisable agency. The agent has to be able to safely incorporate stronger evidence, narrow or explicitly revoke earlier rules when the environment changes, and demote failed procedures. It needs to be able to retire stale information and repair the consequences of its errors, all while preserving a clearly understandable audit record of exactly why those meaningful changes occurred in the first place. And it has to do all this without silently destroying unrelated commitments. Section 6, Current Research Status. It's essential at this stage to measure precisely where this serious engineering program stands today, without any hype or overclaiming. Currently, the energetic paradigm offers a highly coherent architectural blueprint. It outlines exactly how agentic memory could be created as an external control layer wrapped around a present-day AI system, essentially integrating long-horizon state and finite resource allocation into a unified model. But speaking with academic precision here, it has not yet proven that this complete architecture works flawlessly under extended real-world deployment. There is significant, rigorous work remaining. This includes the full implementation of the architecture, conducting longitudinal testing over months rather than just days, and performing strict adversarial evaluation to see how the system handles things like poisoned memories or conflicting authorities. Furthermore, precise cost measurement and direct, rigorous comparisons with simpler baseline memory systems are still required. As this quote highlights, persistent agency requires continuity of obligation, authority, consequence, and repair, not merely continuity of text. It stands as a serious, testable engineering program built on a rather profound principle, that the past becomes true agency only when it continues to govern action, stays bound to reality, and remains open to disciplined correction. Just storing a transcript of what happened is no longer enough. Which leaves us with a final thought to consider as we watch these technologies develop. As our AI systems scale and take on much more complex, autonomous roles in our institutions, will we settle for agents that merely remember everything as a passive archive of history? Or will we demand that they possess the active, energetic control structures necessary to actually take responsibility for tomorrow? Thank you for joining me for this explainer.